Chelmsford City Council, the model of accountability and trust. A greener Chelmsford, a fairer Chelmsford. That is, of course, unless you're looking at the ongoing planning issues surrounding Hamptons Sports and Leisure Centre. If you've not watched our last video summarising the history on this, I strongly suggest you do so. Those of you who are kept informed with this issue will know that last summer, the use of Hamptons by Chelmsford Muslim Society as a place of worship was reported as a breach of planning control. After investigation, the council determined that for this use, on balance, planning permission is required. Nearly 500 of you have now signed a petition to enforce this as a breach of planning control. Since then, however, things have changed, and the council have reconsidered this issue. After a complaint from CMS that they didn't agree with their assessment regarding their current use, the council made an informal decision that this use didn't require planning permission after all. They claimed that their initial assessment was not related to the current use of Hamptons, but for the future plans that CMS had submitted to them. Now, I don't mean to be picky with words here, but the original assessment referred only to an alleged breach and use for these purposes, and recommended that a planning application should be considered as a means of regularising the situation. The key word here is regularising, which is a planning term meaning to invite a retrospective planning application for a breach already committed. Just to remind you, those future plans that CMS submitted did not reflect their initial proposals to their donors for a mosque for 1,000 worshippers, but instead for a sports and leisure facility with basically a multi-use room for much less than 30 people. It's these plans which the council apparently view as requiring planning permission, and not for the weekly use of the main hall for congregational worship. When we questioned the planning department on this, they further added that the number of people attending Hamptons for Friday prayers would not be material to their consideration. They also said that annual religious events, which could likely attract in excess of 1,000 people and probably at unsociable hours, would not require planning permission either, and that the council has no intention of monitoring any change in use of Hamptons going forward, and would rely only on residents reporting any change. Essentially, this gives CMS the green light for Hamptons to be used as a place of worship on a weekly basis, with no limit on numbers attending and without the need for planning permission. This relaxed approach to planning control means there'll be no consideration of parking requirements or noise and disturbance to residents, or indeed any other submission that a formal planning application would normally require. It is, in effect, a delegated decision made at an officer level and denies residents, councillors and authorities any opportunity for consultation. If, like us, you're left feeling somewhat confused by this change of position, you're not alone. Even the leader of the council, Stephen Robinson, noted there are inconsistencies between the two public statements, which needed clarity. One councillor's view was that the initial statement did imply that the current use of Hamptons amounted to a breach of planning. We don't disagree with that. Another councillor's view to legal services was that their delay in deciding legal advice for the planning department made it appear the council was not treating this incident in equal fashion and not presenting an authoritative image with regards to planning. We don't disagree with that either. Over the last 12 months or so, we've obtained a wealth of information and documents under the Freedom of Information Act. This has provided us with a very interesting insight into the internal affairs of the council surrounding this issue. More recently, however, the council has been applying whatever exemptions possible to withhold information we request, most commonly under legal privilege protection. This means that should the council seek advice from their own legal department, they have the right to withhold this information from the public.
Computer says no.
It's therefore of no surprise to us that our most recent haul of documents suggests that all matters on this issue now go through legal services. We sent the link of our last video to all 63 city and parish councillors. Within hours, legal services had contacted them all, telling them not to reply to us. We would, however, like to thank those councillors who replied to us anyway, and we thank you for your contribution. After this, the chief executive himself then wrote to us, apparently on behalf of all councillors, telling us that councillors have no role on this issue and basically stop contacting them, and therefore denying us and you access to your elected representatives of the community. Now, this isn't really an accepted approach regarding how councils should act under these circumstances. It is essential for the proper operation of the planning system that local concerns are adequately ventilated. The most effective and suitable way this can be done is through the local elected representatives, the councillors themselves. For some time now, correspondence that we've received from the council or councillors themselves has contained repetition of the same sentences over and over again, almost word for word, irrespective of what question we ask or information we request. So identical are the responses that we could probably ask them any question at all, such as, what's their view on the new local plan, or what did they have for breakfast today? And the answer would still probably be that it was a matter of fact and degree. The irony here being that in the last 12 months, we've received very little in the way of fact or indeed degree. It's almost as if councillors have been told exactly what to say and effectively what their opinion is to be on the matter. Well, that may be the case. Councillors were issued with a briefing statement, which we're calling the script, were told not to deviate from it, and thereby restrict or control, if you will, what their own opinion may be. It's actually not surprising that senior officers are worried about what councillors might say on this issue when they're left unsupervised. Such as this councillor comparing this issue to whether the council would have any say on whether a shop was to sell dildos or be a funeral director. We don't really think that's an appropriate response for any councillor, least of all one who sits on the planning committee. Here's just another example of guidance for officers and councillors involved in planning issues. Opposing views are often strongly held by those involved. Whilst councillors must take account of these views, they should not favour any person, company, group or locality, or appear to be doing so. Decisions need to be taken in the wider public interest on what can be controversial proposals. Because planning decisions can be controversial, it's particularly important the process is open and transparent. The legal and procedural nature of the planning system means there is a risk of complaints to the Ombudsman for maladministration or a breach of the authority's code. There may also be a legal challenge in the form of a judicial review, in which a judge reviews the lawfulness of a decision or action made by a public body. There is in fact a whole load of other legislation and standards that local councils are expected to comply with under these circumstances. We believe that leaders and senior officers of the council and their legal team are attempting to circumnavigate the planning process in order to make decisions on this issue behind closed doors. They have made informal rulings without consultation or due process, repeatedly withheld information from us, failed to enforce the documented breach of planning control, failed to keep residents updated as promised, restricted councillors' rights to exercise their own judgment, issued confusing and contradicting statements. And to be honest, I could go on and on and on. All of this provides us with valid grounds for a formal complaint, which we've now filed. Not that we hold out much hope in a complaints process at a council where it's likely to land on the desk of the very people controlling this issue, but it is a process that we have to follow to get to where we need to go, the local government ombudsman, and if necessary, a judicial review. The council's advice to CMS remains that a planning application will be required for their longer term plans or any increased use for worship. We have our doubts this application will be forthcoming or enforced in any way by the council. It's therefore going to be down to residents and us to monitor the use of Hamptons going forward, and we'll be watching.